So, as promised, it is finally here. Mayweather Pacquiao, May 2nd. I can't believe I'm actually doing this video. It's 5 years in the making. I've been doing YouTube videos since really like 2010, or I think 2009. And honestly, I got to a point where I didn't think this fight was ever gonna happen, but the boxing gods answered our prayers, so to speak. And May 2nd, we have this era's super fight as Floyd Money Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao finally get it on at the MGM Grand live in Las Vegas for the bragging rights, for the biggest money both fighters have ever seen. And really, this is going to be the biggest grossing boxing event in the history of the sport. So I'm not going to go into detail as far as both fighters individually. I mean, Google and YouTube are your best friends. But really, down to the meat and potatoes of it all, we got to get down to the actual intangibles of this fight. And by the end of this video, I will be giving you my prediction on who I think is going to win. So it's very rare in boxing that you have the #1 and the #2 fighters in the world, pound for pound. And obviously, that's a mythical ranking system. But as far as we know it in today's era, it's very rare. And not only that, but it's rare that both guys would be in the same weight class, and let alone being in the same weight class for the last 5 years, which for some people it's been somewhat of a slap in the face, I guess, being that the fight is happening now. But what I will say is that I don't think the fight happening now is going to be that much of a letdown as people may be thinking going into the fight, because we can't forget that Floyd Mayweather is 38, Manny Pacquiao's 36, and in my opinion, they have both seen their best days. But what I will say is both of them, I believe, have one last great outing, which I think is making this fight very intriguing, because the casual fans are looking at it like finally it's happening. They're making parties, making a big event about it, and the focus is on boxing, you know. And I think it's pretty obvious. But for the boxing fans, you know, a lot of us are kind of at a point now where, you know, throughout the years, you know, we've heavily favored one guy or heavily favored the other. And I gotta say, as the fight was announced, I've seen a lot of opinions change or sway left and right. Pacquiao fans thinking Mayweather's gonna win, Mayweather fans thinking Pacquiao's gonna win. It's kind of crazy, you know. So again, it adds to the intrigue to the fight. Obviously, with Floyd Mayweather going into the fight, he is the obvious favorite. He's undefeated. You know, he's fought top caliber guys just as Pacquiao has throughout their careers, because people got to remember, and again, I don't want to backtrack too much as far as their careers before, but there are fights before Oscar De La Hoya, because he seems to be that that point where their careers changed as far as monetarily for both Pacquiao and for Mayweather. This actual fight, I think what people need to focus on is not so much what Floyd and Manny did 5-6 years ago. I think we really need to focus on what they've done in the last like 2 years, because again, the reality is we're getting a 38-year-old and a 36-year-old at the end tail of their careers. And you know, I think there's things that both guys can still do very well and can still hold their own as far as being elites, even at welterweight right now, with the division getting stacked up with a lot of killers. You know, these guys would still be favored over all these guys for the simple fact that they're still at elite levels. But you have to take into account that you can't go too far back as far as what they did to guys 5 years ago, because there's just things, like I said, that I don't think they'll be able to pull off anymore when the bell rings on May 2nd. Now, as far as intangibles are concerned, with both Mayweather and Pacquiao, I'm going to give as far as what I think both guys should implement in the fight to be successful against the other one. So for Floyd Mayweather, he's got to fight his fight, man. I mean, I think he's really got to bait Pacquiao into traps and kind of make Pacquiao think that you know, he's got his number. But I think what Floyd on his end he needs to do on the offensive end, man, is I mean, I know people might disagree with this, but he's got to throw considerably a lot more than he has in recent history, only because being defensive is one thing, but he does have to score, and I don't think that Floyd is going to have a lot of success just having throwing one counter shot and getting out of the way. What gave Marquez success, because a lot of people seem to compare Marquez and Mayweather, which I think is a foolish thing to do when you're looking at how this fight can play out. Marquez, in the later years, became an offensive-minded counterpuncher where he'll counter you, but he'll follow up with more shots. Where Floyd is kind of a one-punch counter, get out of the way. You know, because, again, Floyd is an economical puncher, and he is safety first. And for the most part of his career, with the exception of like when he was at lightweight and at junior lightweight, where he had a considerable power edge over most guys, you know, you've seen the trend when he got up to welterweight or junior welterweight and welterweight. Not to say that he doesn't hit hard, but you know, he's thinking safety first. These are bigger punchers, and most of the welterweights he has fought are from like they come in fight night like 161, 162. So essentially, you know, he is fighting bigger guys. So, but what I will say is that in both of the Maidana fights, there's just things I've picked up on, and I've talked with several people about this, and like I'm not the only one who's noticing this, but I think what we're starting to see with Floyd is he's very defensive and he's very smart, but he's losing little steps. And again, when people say that, like automatically people think like, oh well, yeah, you think Floyd's like got one foot in the grave. It's not the case. In the case where you're fighting somebody like a Marcos Maidana, who is, yeah, a bit reckless, but not the quickest guy to the punch, and I just saw things in that fight, man, that drew concern for me for Floyd Mayweather, who most of the time, man, doesn't get hit with his own counter shots, as far as where, you know, the shot that, if you look closely at the shot that Floyd threw in the third round, you know, that's the shot that everybody's talking about. But not that I'm making that much of a big deal, but you do have to at least look at the actual punch and or the series of punches that were happening for Floyd to get hit. Floyd loves to back up to a corner and either throw that check hook or that little lead right, where it was a pull counter really. And Maidana, again, not the fastest guy to the punch, not the quickest feet, but he was able to counter Floyd with that punch that Floyd, for a lot of the times, gets people with. But in both fights, I just think Floyd is starting to show that he understands his body. He understands what he can do in the ring, what is going to be not the best approach, I would say. And I think we saw that in the first fight. What we saw in the second Maidana fight was a Floyd who put on who had a better game plan, at least in the sense to fight safe, and you know, he basically threw one punch counter shots and was able to just grab Maidana. Granted, it's a strategy, and you know, some people will argue Floyd was holding a lot and what have you, but you know, the thing with Maidana too is he doesn't have the quickest feet, and he was just lunging right into Floyd. So that strategy worked to a T for Floyd. But what it showed me though is that I started going back a little bit in certain fights that, you know, Floyd had with, you know, with Cotto, and even dating back. You know, you don't want to go back, but I forgot what trainer says this, but fighters have habits. You know, and when you're training a fighter, you don't really want to look for things that a fighter doesn't do. You want to look for things a fighter does a lot. And I think what Floyd is doing a lot now is being very conservative and trying to really eliminate himself from being in danger, even to the extent of not making it a thoroughly exciting fight. Because I'm of the argument that Floyd, when he says things like I'm fighting this type of way to please the fans, I don't buy that. And the reason I don't buy that is because Floyd is a professional fighter, and when you're in the ring, you obviously are gonna play the best route for you to not get hurt, even in the case if you're an offensive fighter. So though Floyd is a defensive wizard, I don't think he is at that point to put his neck out there just for the sake of the fans. So I think what we've been seeing is a 38-year-old Floyd Mayweather. Now for Manny Pacquiao, he's had obviously a roller coaster of a career. Obviously more recently, as with the Marquez knockout, at that point we thought this fight was never gonna happen. And it's funny how boxing just works that way sometimes, where 1 or 2 years can really change the perception. I think with Manny Pacquiao, he has to be very, very mindful of the fact that Floyd Mayweather is a chess player. And, Floyd, like I said, when talking about the Maidana fight, he's a guy who has 4 or 5 different styles to beat you in. So what does Manny Pacquiao do? I mean, with Manny Pacquiao, we have to realize, like, he's not a one-dimensional fighter. Let me say that. But Pacquiao only knows one direction as far as how to apply his offense and his technique. And I think what we've been seeing with Manny Pacquiao in the later years is I guess you could say a polished Manny Pacquiao. Still is not a conventional guy. Makes mistakes that, if you would see guys in the gym, like, fighting for the first time or training for the first time, or like, you tell them like you're doing it wrong. But I think Emmanuel Stewart said it best when he said, Manny Pacquiao fights like Manny Pacquiao the best. And he's got a point, because there's just things that Manny Pacquiao does wrong where, some people say he's off balance and whatnot, but he's very effective, man. And we've seen him get clipped, get hurt, get dropped, get knocked out. But the one thing that remains with Pacquiao, man, is he's a risk taker. And I think that while people think that's going to be a detriment to him in this fight, I don't think it's going to be. I think that has to be the approach, because if he sits around and tries to outwit or outpoint Floyd, he's going to have a very tough time. I think what he needs to do in this fight, really, man, is really test Floyd's motor, man. And I'm not one that has been saying like Floyd's legs are depleted, but we're gonna find out by round 6 and 7 when the fight is progressing. And Floyd is known to be a slow starter, but I don't think he's gonna figure out Manny that easy, man. And when you go down the line of guys that have given Pacquiao trouble, I mean, predominantly Juan Manuel Marquez. I mean, you gotta look at these fights, man. I mean, Marquez in not one of these fights ever totally dominated Manny Pacquiao. All these fights were close. But the one thing that, again, separates Marquez from Floyd Mayweather is that Marquez himself is a risk taker. And I think it's been a detriment to him, and then on the flip side of it as well, it's a crowning win in his career. So at this point, for both Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, who has more to lose? Obviously, it would be Floyd. But out of both guys, who do you think would be the risk taker in this scenario when it gets to a point where somebody's going to have to step on the gas? I got to say, man, I'm going to go with Manny Pacquiao in this fight, man. I think what makes Floyd so great is the fact that he is such a brain in there And I think defensively, I know he's going in there thinking or knowing he's gonna have no problems with Manny Pacquiao. But Sugar Ray Leonard said something as well several years ago that stuck with me, and I always played it in my mind for how long this fight would be shelved for. Like, basically, you know, the longer this fight played out as far as it not happening, I was starting to lean towards Pacquiao, because I think what I thought would happen, we're starting to see with Floyd. Just little fractions of, you know, his reflex time and his instincts. I don't think it's there anymore. Now, like I said, they're still, these guys are still at elite levels, but I think on May 2nd, like what Sugar Ray Leonard said, Floyd's boxing brain and his body for the first time are gonna hit a little crash course, and I think Floyd's gonna be just that short and of missing Pacquiao shots. And I think the work rate, and I think Pacquiao's foot speed is gonna make it hard for Floyd to be a one-shot counterpunch fighter for 12 rounds. And I think he's gonna have to come out and really lay some leather on Pacquiao, and early on. So I just see the fight playing out where Pacquiao's foot speed, his movement, and the fact that I don't think that Pacquiao's gonna be sitting there all night with Floyd. I really think he's gonna come out of his comfort zone to try to hit Pacquiao with the shot, and I think Floyd's gonna get dropped for the first time in his career. And I might be the only person on YouTube saying this, but I honestly think, man, that at this stage of Floyd's career, this style matchup is gonna be bad for him. And there's just things I saw in the Maidana fight, and like I said, I'm only really basing on what they've done in the last couple of years, man, because that's just, it is what it is. And with Pacquiao, we're still seeing, in a sense, that Pacquiao who's gonna be aggressive, who's gonna throw punches, and I don't think it's gonna give Floyd the real estate that people think, man. Like, I really don't think that's gonna happen. So while some people think Pacquiao needs a knockout to win, I think he's going to get a 115-113 unanimous decision. Maybe a split decision, depending how some of the judges have it play out. But I could be wrong, and it could blow up in my face. But, I mean, I honestly feel confident that Pacquiao's going to win this fight. I think both guys are going to put on great performances, and they're going to have their last great outing, man. And that's, in a sense, what all we can really hope for. But I just got this feeling Pacquiao is gonna pull it off, and I think Floyd is not gonna be able to deal with Pacquiao's work rate enough to steal rounds from him, or like what some people think, he's gonna minimize Pacquiao's output. I don't see that happening based on how I've been seeing Floyd in the last two fights. So I got Manny Pacquiao unanimous or split decision. So let me know what you think. My apologies again for procrastinating, but you got it. So let me know what you think. Subscribe, hit the links, comment below who you got winning the May 2nd fight. And I got Manny Pacquiao unanimous decision or split decision. So as I always say, subscribe, hit the links, and I will be back with you soon.